We welcome you to the second edition of the In Conversation with Mr. Malin Gumbu, the General Secretary of the Indian Himalayan Council of the Nalanda Buddhist Tradition. In the first edition, Mr. Gumbu had walked us through the evolution of this organization, which is but very recent, and told us about how over the recent times this organization has evolved into a living bridge, blessed by none other than His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, and the guardians of the four Mahayana Nalanda traditions. In that heartfelt conversation, we heard from Mr. Gumbu how the movement has awakened a curiosity, not just amongst the Buddhist world, but across several faiths and generations. So therefore today, let us continue that discussion and hear from Mr. Gumbu how this organization and the knowledge and history of the Nalanda Buddhist tradition can help us to explore, to learn and live, and inspire ourselves towards a world that is more peaceful and compassionate. I'm sure there's a lot that we'll get to hear from Mr. Gumbu. So without wasting further time, let me hand over to Mr. Gumbu to tell us how the wisdom that we get from the Nalanda tradition remains a timeless guide on life's journey. All right. So coming back to what you were just saying in terms of the Nalanda Buddhism, the Mahayana form of Buddhism, and how we have sort of been able to establish this form of Buddhism here in India and have taken it out to the world through Tibet, which is really interesting. But this also is something extremely important that you bring out is because for us, let's say if we just look at this not only through the prism of Buddhism, but if we look at this from the prism of, let's say, any other thing. Let's say if we look at it from the point of view of history, if we look at it from the point of view of culture, if we look at it from the point of view of society, we see that there is an aspect of civilization here. There's an aspect of civilizational connect between India, what was then India, and Tibet. And that continues through Nalanda Buddhism, which is, I think, something that also establishes the fact that India, or what was Bharat, as we knew it, and we call it Bharat now again, had historical and civilizational linkages with what was Tibet, then Bhutan, and the other parts of the Himalayas. So, therefore, I think this is something that goes back centuries. And therefore, I think it gives us a sense of sort of reassurance that the form of Buddhism that you spoke about has its roots here, right here in India and in Tibet, and any other country, any other, let's say, adversary to the concept of Buddhism here or in Tibet will never succeed.
Yes, you are right. The role of Buddhism, and then the civilizational connect, and the role played by Buddhism as far as India is concerned, and then the Asian countries, including Tibet and China, is concerned. It has been a civilizational influence. Now when we speak of a geographical location like the present Tibet, and then the Monjul area which is now in India, and then Bhutan, the Bumthang, so and then across the Himalayan region there was a concept of the Mon. The Mon used to be again civilizational, there is a reference of Mon civilization, which needs to be further researched and then developed. A lot of work needs to be done in that area also. So what I'm trying to speak is of a geographical, the civilizational connect through Buddhism that happened, across the Himalayan region. So this Mongol and the Mon region, and then the Bhutan, Tibet, these were all at the crossroads. And then this is where the Buddhism came. And then Buddhism connected, the Mon area of Mon area had again earlier the influence from the Indian side in Assam. If you see the ancient Assam, the different kingdoms that happened in Assam, the Ahoms, you had even the Koch kingdom, which also had influence on the Mon area and Bhutan and all those things. So these were again areas which were distinct as far as Tibet is concerned. Tibetan area of influence, their area, and then the Bhutan, and then the Mongol area. All these were, defined areas with their own specific boundaries, and then ruled by different kings, principalities over different period of time. So, there is a common understanding because of the historical development that Tibetan the Buddhism that in the Himalayan region came from Tibet and then developed. But then, if you see the history now, as I was saying, that it was in the 8th century that Guru Padma Sambhava introduced Buddhism into the Mon areas, and then the Bhutan area and the Himalayan region before he went. So there were, after his introduction of the Buddhism in the Himalayan region like Mon, there were, Buddhist scholars, masters who developed, like, there were many Nyingma masters. Like Pema Lingpa, Radha Lingpa, and then later on the Lama Tanpa, Tanpe Drone, and then other scholars like Mera Lama, who built the Tawang Monastery in the 1680s, 17th century. So, Buddhist scholarship developed in the region. And then later on, as it developed in Tibet also, the development in Tibet of the masters was also very strong, and then they also contributed, and then there was exchange of ideas, and then migration also. You have the visit of the first karma power, that is Dusum Khenpa was the first karma power who visited the Mon area. And then that was during the king who was in Tawang. That time the Mon king was King Drathung. So Drathung king gave the patronage to the first Karmapa, who came to the Mon area and then spread and developed Buddhism further. So that is, we are talking about a time of 12th century. So after that, the second Karmapa, third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorji also they came. That is how the Kagyu lineage, even the reincarnation system of the Tulkus, which is a thing which developed in Tibet, which was not in the Nalanda Buddhism earlier time. But this concept of reincarnation or the Tulku system of Rinpoche's, it started first, they say, from the Karmapa. The first Karmapa, that now the present Karmapa, who is Urgen Trinle Dorji, is the 17th Karmapa. So the Tulku lineage system of reincarnation, they say, started from the time of the first Karmapa. So before that, there was no concept of reincarnation and all those things. So it started, that is what they say, from the Karmapa, first Karmapa, that is in the 12th, 11th, 12th century. From the first Karmapa's time. So that started the concept of reincarnation. Even the concept of, the four main traditions that developed in Mahayana tradition or Nalanda tradition, that is the Nyingma tradition, and then the Kagyu tradition, then the Sakya tradition, and then the latest one is the Geluk tradition. Even all these four traditions also developed in Tibet. And then it was a later development into the Nalanda Buddhism, which happened mostly in Tibet, because Tibet, produced great Buddhist masters. So, every master, saw some new things and then gave a new name. So that is how. Now, Nying means old. Pa means the people who follow it. So it is Nyingmapa is the oldest Buddhist form of Nalanda Buddhist tradition, which was started by Guru Padmasambhava. So these all things development took place, and the great masters they developed in Tibet. So over a period of time, migrations took places. There was a lot of religious exchange. Between the Mon area and then the Tibet area, Bhutan, you have the historical development. So this civilizational influence that happened, but then that was one thing that Buddhism went from India, and then even in the Mon region and then Tibet, and then as far as their geographical concerns were concerned, the boundaries and territories were well defined as far as the Tibet region is concerned, and then Mon region is concerned, and then Mon region later on, some part of the Mon region went to Bhutan. Even the Mon civilizational story extends up to Burma and then right up to Ladakh and Himachal. All this, so it was a very large area of which was identified across the Himalayan region as Mon. Even the Lepchas of Sikkim, they are also Mon. So what I was trying to say was that even if you see historically, uh, the the boundaries were defined. So it was the civilizational influence of Buddhism, or the Guru Padma Sambhava's work that went across the borders and then unified these places, and then the construction of the Tawang monastery that took place in the 17th century by Mera Lama. And then they say that some historians they say that Tawang monastery was only a establishment of a symbol of establishment of the religion, because if you see the in the Tibetan history also, it was during the 16th 17th century, that was during the fifth Dalai Lama's time, that the fifth Dalai Lama's time, the Tibet, got in a way unified. Otherwise, even the Tibetan region, what we understand Tibet today, was into divided into small principalities. So it was during the fifth Dalai Lama's time that Tibet in a way unified, and the fifth Dalai Lama assumed both the political power and the spiritual power. So he was both the spiritual head and the political head of Tibet. That is a theocracy state. We started during the fifth Dalai Lama's time. And then it was during his time only that the Potolhasa Palace or the Gandan Prodang administration was, formed in Tibet. So that at that time, it extended to Mon area also, wherein Tawang Monastery was constructed. But historians say that it was more of a symbol of religious institution there, but not having the territorial control as far as Tibet and the Mon area is concerned. The Mon area, they say, were ruled by different kings over a different periods of time, and then they had their own village chief and the principalities chiefs who used to have the work of governance. So the Tawang monastery was only as a symbol of religious expansion, which was not territorial expansion.
If
So
I
that is how even the geographical thing. So that civilizational influence has been there in that way, as far as Buddhism is concerned.
Right. If I can just stop you here and ask you this. So you said the Tawang monastery has it was more it had more of a religious significance, and there was nothing territorial about it. Now, when China claims Tawang and also different parts of Arunachal Pradesh, or calls the entire of the whole Arunachal Pradesh as Southern Tibet, what are your sort of what's your response to this? How does China refer to Tawang as not just a place of religious significance, but it also calls it a part of southern Tibet?
Now, as far as the Indian part of the Himalayas are concerned, or the Tawang area is concerned, we had no borders with China. We had borders only with Tibet. And then now, as China has, illegally occupied Tibet, so on the same lines, what China is saying as far as the southern Tibet, and then the disputing of the entire Arunachal, the erstwhile Nepal is concerned. That is something which is again a illegal occupation of Tibet, and then on the same line illegally extending it to the southern Tibet or the erstwhile Nepal region of Arunachal Pradesh today, because whatever claim that they are making is devoid of the historical evidences. Now, as I was saying you that there's a book by T.S. Murthy, who was earlier a political officer in the Tawang region and from the civil servant, who has written a book, and then in which he has tried to highlight this point that the Mon area were distinct, and then had distinct boundary as far as Tibet was concerned, as far as Bhutan was concerned. And then the McMahon line that was drawn in the 1914, in which both Tibet and China was also in the conference. And then lastly, China did not sign. It was a different thing, but they were involved in the negotiations of the making of the McMahon line during the British India's time in 1914. So the basis of the McMahon line itself was on the basis of the local traditional boundaries that existed between the Mon areas and then the Tibet and then the Bhutan. So that has been the basis of the McMahon line itself. So these were the traditional boundaries which were defined. So even if you see historically, the Mon area or the present Tawang were never part of Tibet. And then, as far as the Tawang monastery is concerned, it was, I was saying, a religious symbol extension. The religious Tawang monastery, because it had the monks and other things, so the villagers used to contribute some donation in the kind of food grains and other things to the monastery. But then the Tibetan administration was concerned only with the Tawang monastery and not with the local. The local territorial governance was done by the local chief themselves or the kings who were there at different points of time. If you see, starting from the right, the King Kalawangpu, who is supposed to be the first king of Tawang, that is dating back to the 6th and 7th century. And then the queen, Dakini queen, Khandodowa Jangmo, who is also supposed to be, credited with the starting of, the Buddhism in the Mon area. So if you see the history, so the things were, and because of that traditional boundaries which were quite clear, even the first Karmapa in the 12th century, he talks about the region of Mon and then the region of Tibet. And then he speaks in his songs, poems which he has composed also, that I am traveling to the region called Mon, where I have never been earlier. And then he says, this site is our Tibet. So there also in his poem and in songs, he defines that, Tibet and the Mon regions were separate territories, having separate existence. So the traditional boundaries were there from that time. And during the British India's times also, when the East India Company came, they signed in some sort of 1844. In 1853, they signed an agreement with the local chief of Monpas, and then the Thongjis, who were, having allegiance under the Koch kingdom. That time around 15th century, 16th century, the Koch kingdom in Assam. The Koch kingdom of Assam were nearer to this Mon area. So the three Mon regions, which is called the northern Mon region, that is Tawang, the central Mon region, which is Dirang area, and then the southern Mon region, which is Kalaktang area. So all these areas, the northern Mons were at some point of time with the Bhutan also, and then the central Mon was with the Thongji, who used to be the chief of the Shedupen tribe. So they were called the Thongjis. And then the southern ones also had local chiefs. So the British, even the East India Company, signed an agreement in 1844 and 1853 with the local chief of the Monpas and the Thongjis. And then they gave them some, uh, honorarium. in lieu of the taxes that they would not levy from the people. So in that also, it was clear that these areas had their own existence. And then the Tawang monastery had only a religious control, but not of the governance and territorial control. That is what the T.S. Murthy in his book he has tried to highlight. I think this needs to be further researched, so that we come out with a clear picture. And
Right.
then going back to the point that what China is saying, that Tawang or the southern Tibet, is totally devoid of historical facts, and
Right.
a a claim which is totally illegal and then baseless.
Right. I thank you so much. You bring out this, I think, this aspect, which is, of course, known in different circles and known, I mean, historians know it, Buddhist scholars know it, but I think this needs to be publicized. This needs to be sort of brought forward to the forefront. I mean, even more that, the importance of the Mon region. I think the Mon region here really is very important when we have to understand the divisions that were there historically between the Mon region and Tibet. And then you have China, which is actually very far if you really look at it from a geographical point of view. So, therefore, the Mon region, I think, really is important. And it connects again, the Mon region is so important because it is part of uh, what we have in Arunachal Pradesh. It is, like you've mentioned, the Koch kingdom, which were close to these Mon regions, and it is all around us. So I think this is something that needs to be really spoken about more and more so that the common person, the audience that really wants to understand this has not been able to maybe grasp and just things about Tibet, India, and the Tibet, which is occupied by China, of course, and there is India, and that's about it. And there is the Nalanda Buddhism, which is practiced somewhere and it is spreading. I think that's not all. There is so much more to understand. And you've brought this out so well. And I think there cannot be a better explanation also about how Tawang and its mere religious significance, which is huge, but that it is Tawang has been constructed or Tawang was put in place as a center of religious significance, of religious importance. And it had nothing to do with territoriality, right? There was nothing territorial about Tawang. But the way the Chinese have been wanting the Tawang monastery, their eyes are on the Tawang monastery, their eyes are on Tawang, their eyes are on the entire Arunachal Pradesh. That really, I think, is something that can be challenged by the way you have put across the narrative in terms of how these geographical divisions existed and even before the McMahon line was drawn and how the Tawang monastery was set up. So these are, I think, some things that are so crucial, so important for people to know. But here I just also want to ask you once more. Uh, I mean, of course, we have different theories, of different discussions we've had over and over again. But why is Beijing so interested in the Tawang monastery?
As far as Beijing is concerned, now probably there has been not a clear understanding of the history, as I was saying, and then you also have tried to highlight it that there is not a clear understanding of the history as far as the Mon region and the Tibet region is concerned. Many people have a feeling that the Mon region was part of Tibet and all those things. But then when you see the history, things were not exactly like that. There must have been some forceful occupation at some point of history. But then, as far as the Mon region and the Monpas are concerned, they were totally a different race of people who were different from Tibet. So that has been, established over a period of time. But then there is a lack of understanding of the history, and then that is also because of the influence of the Buddhism also. And then if you see the actual occupation or the control in the Tawang region as far as Tibet is concerned happened during the 17th century, and then that was after the construction of the Tawang monastery. Now one has to understand the fact that Buddhism was there in Tawang before 17th century also. And then there was Buddhism which were practiced earlier was the Nyingma traditions. Now history has it that during the 17th century, there were a lot of attack from the Tibet side, in the disguise of the Tawang monastery. And then a lot of the existing monasteries, which were Nyingma tradition monasteries, were destroyed and then converted to Gelug monasteries. Now, the Tawang monastery is a Gelug monastery. I was saying there are four traditions. So there was a sectarian fight also in Tibet as far as the different traditions of the four Nalanda tradition, Mahayana traditions are concerned, there, if you see the history of Tibet, there has been a sectarian fight for the dominance over the Tibet as far as the Buddhism was concerned. So you have at some point of time the Sakya Pandita being the king of Tibet. And then later on, it was in the, then you have the Karmapas also, and then you have the Gelug tradition coming, which is the latest tradition. And then the fifth Dalai Lama being from the Gelug tradition and then taking control. So the occupation, or in a way, you can say, of the Tawang or the Mon region took place much after the 17th century. It started a sort of forceful occupation, and then the dominance of the religion, and then the establishing of the Gelug tradition of the Buddhism in the Mon areas. So you will find even the wars fought between Bhutan and Tibet for the dominance over the Tawang region. And then the Gelug tradition, the Gelug Tibetan forces were supported by the Mongols, the Yungar Mongols. The Mongol, they also helped the Gelug people, took the help of the Mongol kings for their for developing their dominance in different parts of the region. In Tawang monastery, interestingly, you will today also see a painting of Sokpo Jomghar. Sokpo means Mongol. Sokpo Jomghar. So the a commander of Mongolia's riding the horse. I think his portrait picture is there in Tawang
Yes,
monastery.
I have seen
So
it.
those people helped the Tawang the Gelug forces in developing the dominance of the Gelug tradition over the other Nyingma traditions which were existing before them. So what I was trying to say was that the dominance in the Mon region or Tawang region also developed after the 17th century through the establishment of the Tawang monastery. If you see historically, Mera Lama tried to develop this Tawang monastery in Mera in Bhutan, which is today Sakteng Mera, which is in Bhutan. Mera Lama, he hails from the Sakteng Mera area. So he tried to develop this monastery in his own place in Mera. But then when he was trying to construct the Drukpa, or the Kaju people is dominant in Bhutan. So these people did not allow him to construct the monastery, and then he was driven out. He left Sakteng Mera area and then came towards Tawang side. And in Tawang also, he looked for different places to construct the monastery, because Tawang at that time was, Nyingma tradition was there. There was another tradition called Buddhist Bodong tradition. Bodongs were there, Drukpas were there in this area. So Beralama had a tough time because he belonged from the Gelug tradition. So he had a tough time in constructing the Tawang monastery itself. So the people, they did not give him land. So that is also a story there. So, it happened after the, 17th century, the religious dominance. Earlier, otherwise, Buddhism was there, Ingma tradition, all those things were there, but there was no much control from Tibet side. The control started, after the 17th century and then the construction of Tawang monastery.
But
But as I was saying, the
Mhm.
Tawang monastery was only as a symbol of religion.
Right.
And then the Tibet was also concerned only with Tawang monastery. And the Tawang monastery's administration was also controlled by the local lamas. So there was no much control from the Tibet side also as far as Tawang monastery, because the Mera Lama was also from this area and he was the first abbot of the Tawang monastery. The second abbot was also from Mon region only. So there was no, even the administration of the monastery was also by a committee who was all Monpas only from that region. So Tibetan control was also not there as far as even the monastic functioning also.
But I
It
just
was just a support thing, or the fifth Dalai Lama blessed the Tawang monastery. That a sort of patronage was there.
right. But I
So
just
that was the history. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I just want to ask you here, I mean, just to stop you again and ask you. So after the coming of the Gelug tradition, then you have the other traditions which were there. Uh, there, like you've said, there has been a bit of a conflict. There has been a bit of a struggle for religious dominance. Do you think these matter when it comes to, let's say, a force like China trying to take control? Do you think they play into the disputes, or these are just normal and these are resolved by the larger, let's say, the conglomerate of all the different sects coming together and resolving this in the interest of the religion, of course?
Now, as far as China is concerned, they illegally occupied Tibet, and then, to control of Tibet, and then the nothing could be done in that direction. But as far as the different, traditions are concerned in the Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism or the Nalanda Buddhism, there were, if you see historically, there were sectarian differences, traditional differences were there. But that is why. But the fifth Dalai Lama, in the 17th century, took control of the governance of Tibet. So that was a thing which was concerning the Gelug tradition. And then the sixth Dalai Lama, after that, being born in Monyul, again in Tawang area. So, as far as China is concerned, now His Holiness, he was the spiritual and the political temporal head of Tibet during that time when, in 1959, China annexed Tibet. So that is why His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, as the head of the state, left the country in exile to India. So that is why it becomes, important for China as far as His Holiness is concerned. So, as a head of the state, and not as a particularly belonging as far as the different traditions are concerned. So there are other traditions, because if you see the Tibetan history also, the different regions has influence of different traditions. There are areas which are stronghold of Geluk. There are areas in Tibet which are strongholds of the Kayupa tradition, Karmapa. There are also areas which belong to the Sakya traditions. So the entire Tibet, if you see, you have the four traditions have their own hold and followings as far as the people are concerned in Tibet. So it is not important for China, because as far as the exile government is concerned, on the lines of the tradition. But as far as back in Tibet, you see there are different traditions, and even in the exile government, they have the experience that though because of the world international image and the figure that His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has developed, and then his cause and concern for the Tibet's independence. So His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama is accepted today as a great spiritual and a Buddhist leader. But even if you see tradition wise, the all the traditions, they don't accept, as far as religion is concerned, they don't look up to His Holiness as the head.
Right,
Like Karma Kaju people will not look up to His Holiness as to be the head of their religion.
right, right. But
Likewise, the Sakya tradition, likewise the Nyingma tradition.
right,
Now, even I will, if you just for your information, that even between different traditions, like for example the Kagyu tradition. Now, the Kagyu tradition in themselves are not able to find out who will be their head as far as the Kagyu tradition is concerned. His Holiness Karmapa, he is belonging from Karma Kagyu tradition. In Kagyu itself, there are 8 major divisions. So each division has a different head. So as a result, the Kaju tradition does not have one single religious head.
Right. No,
Likewise, in Nyingma also there are divisions.
right.
Sakya, of course, it is a family tradition sort of thing. If you see in Sakya tradition,
Right.
you will see the Sakya tradition. His son, they will take over as the next Sakya. It's a family thing. So like that, what I'm trying to say is there are different divisions within the tradition itself, and then the different traditions would have their own head of their tradition, and then the Karma Kaju tradition or the Nyingma tradition would not accept His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama as their religious head.
Right. So this hierarchy
So
that
that
you were talking about,
hierarchy is there.
yeah, these hierarchies are there and they exist, but the fact is the way the Nalanda tradition has been continuing. I think that's something that is so essential and so important. And thanks to people like you who are sort of
Mhm.
trying to take this forward and spreading it amongst also not just the believers of Buddhism and scholars of Buddhism, but also outside the youth, for people like me that want to learn about it, right?
Mhm.
We don't have much more time, but one last question that I want to ask you, and if you could very quickly take this, is we have seen recently in Bodh Gaya where there were, tensions of in terms of the different groups that I mean, it was also about the hierarchy there. It was also about who sort of takes control. So how does these things get resolved, and does it matter really when it comes to strengthening the Nalanda tradition and really taking it forward?
The thing that has been going on in the Bodh Gaya has been, happening for a very, very long time, because the Buddhist people felt that, Bodh Gaya being the most sacred place for the Buddhists is concerned. So, the management and the control of the Bodh Gaya temple should be with the Buddhists. But then, there are historical developments to that, and then it is a very complex issue, how the Bodh Gaya Temple Management Act of 1949 came into being. And then this is a government of Bihar's legislation, wherein the central government says they have nothing much to intervene. It is for the state government to decide on the matter. But as far as Lord Buddha was concerned, see, Lord Buddha was against the idol worship. If you see the emergence of Lord Buddha and the teachings of Lord Buddha, also it came as a a sort of answer to the different rituals and other karam kants and practices that were prevalent at that point of time. And Lord Buddha said, all this is not very important. All this, without this also you can achieve the truth, ultimate truth. So that was a new path which was shown by Lord Buddha, and then Lord Buddha was against, so to say, the idol worship or something like that. So in the context of development of Nalanda Buddhism, if you want to develop the practice and then spread it more and more amongst the people for the benefit of all sentient beings, then that things are not very important as far as the what is happening in Bodh Gaya is concerned. But then it will be for the people there who are there, or you say the Hindu brothers. It will be a large heart kind of sort of thing from their side, who would agree and then voluntarily say give it to the Buddhists for their own management. So that sort of thing should come out, not by compulsion or not by the force of law, but by the people. The Buddhism and Hinduism sees many similarities, and then Buddhism evolved from the Sanskrit tradition, and Buddhism has also adapted many of the traits of the Hinduism, and then vice versa also. So that being the situation of the Sanatan Dharam and all those things, the this has to be also looked from that point of view. And then as far as the Nalanda Buddhism is concerned, what is more important is the practice rather than the places of worship.
That was indeed a knowledge filled session. And I cannot but be more thankful to you, Mr. Gumbu, for talking us through all the different aspects of the Nalanda Buddhist tradition and how your organization now plays a central role in really spreading the knowledge and the wisdom that we get from this tradition. Thank you so much, and we look forward to talking to you again.